We got some good economic news based on the most recent inflation report, which is something I like to update you on because that is kind of the primary concern as far as economic pain goes. Otherwise, the economy is largely headed back in the right direction. Job growth is great, unemployment's low, GDP growth is back, but inflation's still hurting people. And so we got good numbers just indicating what economists call cooling off of inflation, and that is absolutely what we're hoping for. So here from CNBC, the consumer price index rose less than expected in October, an indication that while inflation is still a threat to the United States economy, pressures could be starting to cool. The index, a broad-based measure of goods and services costs, increased 0.4% for the month and 7.7% from a year ago, according to a Bureau of Labor Statistics released Thursday. Respective estimates from Dow Jones were for rises of 0.6% and 7.9%. So you can see there, monthly and annually, it is lower than expected, which is exactly what we're hoping for. Here's a little bit of a graph indicating the change we've seen. And then finally, quote, the report overstates the case that inflation is coming in, but it makes the case inflation is coming in, said Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics. It's pretty clear, he continues, that inflation has definitely peaked and is rolling over. All trend lines suggest that it will continue to moderate going forward, assuming that nothing goes off the rails. So what that means is time is what we're waiting. You know, we're just waiting out time for the trends to continue and for inflation to cool off, which from the beginning, with the actions of the Fed, as well as the further recovery from the pandemic-caused economic downturn, we understood there was going to be inflation. Eventually, it was going to start cooling off, and I'm happy that it is. We'll look a little bit here of CNBC kind of reacting to this, specifically reacting to the reaction of the markets to this news.
Wow. Rick, while you were talking, that was pretty unbelievable just to watch the Dow futures. I think we had on the chart the whole time. Again, right before this number, the futures for the Dow up by 50 points. Now they're up by almost 650, and it took off immediately. I don't know if we can take a look also at the 10-year just to see what was happening with that. Rick, you were busy reading the headlines on some of these things, but what are your thoughts about this movement that we've seen? Wow, the 10-year note falling below 4%. What do you think,
Huge move
Rick?
in Fed funds also.
Yeah, I tell you, the 10-year note below 4% is huge psychologically, obviously, but I think we get some good insight into the trading community as to what they consider an easing with respect to inflation. So these numbers might look a bit on the warm side just in general, but to watch the equities, to watch the fixed income markets, I think it screams volumes that we are on the right path and investors are going to be piling in if we continue to see these.
Okay, so happy markets on that front, which is also good. Now, because I'm a political commentator, my first thought when I saw this, besides, okay, good that inflation is getting better, is if we see this over the next 2 years, I do think that sets up a really good moment for whoever runs against the Democrat to be defeated. Meaning, if both there were big accomplishments under the Democratic Party legislatively, and we see the similar variables economically we're seeing now besides inflation, but inflation gets better, now you not only have political successes, you not only have a really broken down Republican Party as far as their brand, if you want to call it that, for the huge threat to democracy they pose and their attachment to Trump and all of this, but you also have almost all good economic indicators, not to speak of all the horrible things we have in our economy always, but compared to other economic times, we could be looking really good, and that could very much help the Democratic Party. Because of course, while we understand not all things are tied to the party in power, that's how people see it. So if they go into an election, they a lot of times react based on the health of the economy. So if you could have the energy we saw in the midterms of people, even with inflation, still siding with the Democrats much more than most people expected because of things like abortion rights and the threat to democracy, etc., but also a good economy, I think you are in a really good place to send the Republican Party home with their tails between their legs. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before any of the clips are uploaded to YouTube, plus get access to an extra full show every Saturday that only members can see, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Luke Beasley. That's patreon.com/Luke Beasley, and there is a link in the description.